Howdy gamers! I bet you've been wondering, wow, if only there were some Dungeons and Dragons nerd who would be capable of telling me what classes are good to play in Baldur's Gate 3, because oh boy howdy, I sure do love the game, but I'm just a fucking moron. Offbeat Outlaw Challenge, don't be antagonistic to your audience, Impossible Edition. What up? My name is Offbeat Outlaw. I am a Dungeons and Dragons professional, as well as a Baldur's Gate 3 streamer, and I have played this game quite a lot. Don't look at my playtime. It's too long. And I played even more Dungeons and Dragons. So I've got a pretty good grasp of the game, its mechanics, as well as what makes this game good and what makes the classes in it good. And today I'm going to go through my tier list. I think I finally have a good enough understanding of the game to be able to give you an official tier list on which classes are the best, which are the worst, and which ones are actually competent. It's important to note the context of how we're going to be ranking this. In Dungeons and Dragons, the context is people's home games, and they've got homebrew monsters with thousands of health. It's important to know what classes are capable of dealing the most damage possible. In this video, we're going to be talking about in the context of Baldur's Gate 3, a game that is already made with magic items in specific places, with specific fights that you need to get through in order to progress the game. There are benchmarks that you need to hit. Any class that beats the benchmark, it's a pass or fail. It doesn't matter if you did 1 billion damage in that single hit. If everyone beats that fight in a turn anyway, you didn't do it better. You just overkilled it and got nothing for it. Because of that context, some classes are going to be ranked better and worse than they were in 5th edition, as well as just magic items in general existing as a given thing. I want to make that very clear. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to say this every time until it keeps on getting better, but I've got a fucking Patreon and you should join it. That is right, I have a Patreon. If you like my shorts content, if you like my long form content, please be sure to join it. It is only $3 a month, and it is the best way to support me and my content. You get everything 24 hours early, so you can always be up to date and ahead of all of your other nerd friends who are trying to have the best builds in their games. Become a patron and kick their asses for me. Please and thank you. But that is all, just a brief little message. This is sponsored by you, the people. Here is the tier list, and we're gonna be going through every single class that is good, every single class that's bad, but we're gonna try and get through this pretty quickly because you're busy people and I don't want to waste your time. Starting with the Barbarian. The Barbarian is, in my opinion, a premier damage dealing class in Dungeons and Dragons, at least in Baldur's Gate. In D&D 5e, it's not that great. I know. Now, you're going to hear a lot of my 5e opinions in here, and I'm going to keep those brief because I want to talk about Baldur's Gate 3. But in 5th edition, the Barbarian does not deal a lot of damage, okay? I know, this is insane information, but it only gets 2 attacks. Its damage is not increased by that much because of its rage damage. On top of that, there's no way to increase the number of attacks it makes, so it gets outclassed by every single spellcaster, such as the Warlock, the Wizard, the Sorcerer, the Paladin, and the Fighter. The only class that compares with it in damage are the Rogue and the Monk, and those classes are also not very good. So, either way, 5th edition, not great. Baldur's Gate 3, surprisingly solid. Tanking is not necessarily always a viable way to do things in Dungeons and Dragons. 5th edition, it's hard to draw fire. The best way to deal with a Barbarian is to ignore them. But in Baldur's Gate 3, because of the abundance of magic items, you are able to put up enough damage to compete with the spellcasters and to make it worthwhile to actually get rid of you. The Barbarian as a whole gets a massive bump due to the fact that magic items are consistent and everywhere. They're ubiquitous, as do all the martials, but the Barbarian especially so is able to start dealing out very important types of damage, such as the elemental types of damage very consistently, as well as the fact that Barbarians get access to spells because of these magic items and scrolls and all that. So because of this, the Barbarian is actually quite a solid class, and I think I'm very comfortable putting it in B tier. And all of this without mentioning the fact that they can be very incredibly hard to remove because of rage, giving them way more health as a result of resisting a lot of damage types. Next up we have the Bard. The Bard is a very interesting class in Dungeons and Dragons in general. They are a learned caster, so that means that they learn spells every time they level up. So their spell list is very limited. On top of that, they don't get as many spells in their possible learning options. The spells that they get are good, but there are some spells that you really wish you could have as a bard in Baldur's Gate 3 and Dungeons and Dragons. Now, in Baldur's Gate 3, this is mitigated quite heavily by the fact that you get access to spell scrolls. Spell scrolls are everywhere. You can often line your pockets with them and have the right scroll to match the situation. On top of that, there's some really good magic items early on. Bardic Inspiration is really strong. The Swords Bard got a complete overhaul in its abilities, making it much stronger as a sort of martial caster type of build. The Bard as a whole has gotten a lot more rounded out, I should say, in comparison to some of its other classes. The Bard is quite strong in Baldur's Gate 3, and because it is a caster, it is once again a strong class in general, especially as we start reaching the higher levels. But I do think that the Bard is one of the weaker of the casters as a whole. I'm going to put it comfortably in B tier. It's going to stay in B tier. Next up, we have the Cleric. Ooh, the Cleric. Now, the Cleric is a very, very, very strong caster. In 5th edition, it is one of the strongest casters in the game, and that is maintained in Baldur's Gate 3. Early on, one of the best spells in the game is Spike Growth. It cuts off a huge area, prevents tons of people from getting to you, does shitloads of damage if the enemy is stupid enough to walk into it. It allows you to manipulate the battlefield in very specific ways to set up very specific choke points. It is an incredible spell, and the Nature Cleric has access to it. The Tempest Cleric has access to a very strong ability, maximizing the dice on lightning and thunder rolls. With the access to spells that create water, you can set up vulnerability very easily, meaning that you can dish out insane numbers of damage to whole areas of attackers. A Sorcerer Cleric is one of the strongest AoE damage builds that I've found so far, and I have been labbing these out slowly but surely. Easily one of the strongest builds in the game. It incorporates the Cleric. The Cleric has access to incredibly strong abilities. Shadowheart is a mainstay of most parties. They have access to healing. I don't think I can put the Cleric, at least in the context of Baldur's Gate 3, anywhere else but an indisputable S tier. They have access to a bunch of strong abilities. They are incorporated in a lot of strong builds. They are a mainstay in a party, and because of the course of the adventuring days that you go on, you need that healing to keep going and to stretch out your resources. Next up, we have the Druid. Now, the Druid, I say, it personally, is one of the easiest casters to start playing, especially if you pick the Moon Druid, because you get to play them as a martial. You get to cast your concentration spell over somewhere, and then hop into your animal form and start beating the shit out of people. That's a really, really solid way to use your abilities. It's a really clever thing to start doing when you're playing these classes and these characters. It's super simple, it's super intuitive, and it makes it very easy and fun to play. They also get access to healing, they get access to Spike Growth, which completely trivializes the entire first act of the game. Their subclasses are strong, the class is strong, they're a full caster. I have found that they start to dwindle in their comparative power as you start to progress through the game, especially as you get to Act 3, things start being able to deal with the bullshit of your Druid much easier, but then again, you can become an Owlbear and beat the shit out of people. So I do think that the Druid is a solid contender for A tier. I think it's a really, really strong class. Next up, we have the Fighter. A full disclosure, Fighter is my favorite class in Dungeons & Dragons. It is not my favorite class in Baldur's Gate 3, and this is a surprise to probably my longtime fans. If you've been watching me for a long period of time, you know that I love the Fighter because of its ability Action Surge. Action Surge is easily the strongest Dungeons & Dragons ability in the entire game because it grants you a whole extra goddamn action, and in a game that is limited as Dungeons & Dragons, that extra action goes miles because you can do anything with it. You can cast extra spells, you can do extra attacks, you can do all of this crazy stuff, and that is true for Baldur's Gate 3. But this ability is no longer as unique. You see, the spell Haste works in the exact same way in Baldur's Gate 3. It works very differently in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. In 5e, when you cast haste on somebody, they get an extra action, yes, but that extra action can only be used for a few specific things. Dash, disengage, hide action, or to make a single weapon attack. A single weapon attack. That is the difference. And making a single weapon attack versus a haste, which gives you your whole action, which you can cast spells, attack with, it makes Action Surge less unique, which I 100% agree with as a balancing decision. Action Surge shouldn't be the only ability that can do this incredible thing because it makes everybody a fighter. However, just because it's not unique doesn't mean it's not good. Having extra actions is always viable. Fighter is still a strong class by itself. The Battlemaster Fighter can fuck people up. I'm sure entering the creche in the first area was a harrowing experience for a lot of people, especially in the earlier days of the life cycle of the game. As it goes on, I'm still maintaining that it's really strong. It's a great thing to put on. It's a great dip for martials, the Battlemaster fighter. Being a full fighter gives you access to your third attack action, which if you haste that motherfucker, that's 9 attacks. And because you get access to spells with magic items, and magic items even fucking exist, I cannot with good conscience say that the fighter is anything but a solid pick for A tier. I don't think it's an S tier because its job can be performed by other classes, but I don't think I can say it's done by anything else. Next up, the Monk. Monk fans of my channel, you and I have not always been on good terms. You and I, we've had a tenuous relationship, have we not? I'd say truthful facts that the Monk sucks dick in 5th edition. You'd whine and moan in my comment section, generally make a giant fuss, and it was always a good time. You were never right, of course, but but the Monk in Baldur's Gate 3, I'm sure you all are very happy because holy shit is this class good. The Baldur's Gate 3 Monk, I think, is a contender for one of the best classes in the game. Outputting insane amount of damage with its action economy, it's the magic items you can get, the ability to add extra damage types, Radiant, Necrotic, and Psychic with the open hand class, being able to output insane damage, your spell list being expanded and better with the 4 elements Monk. The Shadow Monk has always been pretty solid as a whole. It wasn't really changed for Baldur's Gate 3, but the open hand Monk is been given leaps and bounds of damage increases, as well as just general quality of life increases. The open hand Monk slaps. The 4 elements Monk is really okay. The Shadow Monk has always been good. The Monk is great in Baldur's Gate 3. It is undisputably solid, and it is one of the most fun classes to play. I love my open hand Monk, Big Punch, who uses its flurry of blows to push people into walls and off cliffs, dealing insane amounts of damage. They also gave the open hand Monk the ability at 6th level to give itself an extra bonus action, and we'll talk more about this later because we all know what's coming. Giving yourself that extra bonus action is insanely good on a Monk because that's a whole extra series of attacks. It's to the point where you don't even need to put Fighter on it because Fighter isn't even increasing its damage by that much at that point. The Monk is in such a great position in this game, and I'm really happy that it is because I've been playing as it, and it's basically a whole new class for me because I've never really enjoyed playing Monk, but this Monk I love. The movement is also super good. Having that increased movement speed means that you can get all around the battlefield, dealing your damage. A lot of people, okay, small side comment, a lot of people are saying, oh, the Tavern Brawler Monk, Strength Monk, just put them in armor. You're not getting it. Look, it's great, but you are probably wasting your turns after you kill whatever you're doing in your only one action. You're not in a position to kill anything else. So you're oftentimes out of position, and it takes you multiple turns to get places, or you're spending more resources dashing, using your key points or whatever to get to where you need to be because you don't have that increased movement speed. That increased movement speed is the bread and butter of how this new Monk works because it deals enough damage. This is exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of the video. Dealing enough. Being able to deal enough damage is super important. It deals enough. You can kill things in one action, go to something else, kill things in one action, go to something else, kill things in one action. It's super efficient. The Monk is one of the most efficient classes in the game if you spec it out as a Dex Wisdom Monk. I highly suggest you do so. Save your feats for something else. 100%, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, the Monk is the premier martial in Baldur's Gate 3. Outputting some of the most damage in the game, dealing some of the hardest hitting damage, having some of the best action economy, undisputed S tier. Next up, we have the Paladin. The Paladin is... Now, here's the thing. I'm starting to notice something. There's a little bit of rank inflation in this game. Everything's really good. This actually gets me a chance to bring up another point about Dungeons & Dragons in general. When someone says a class is good, it just means that it's better than the other classes at a certain job. It doesn't mean the other class is terrible. It just means that all the classes are performing as intended and the class that is the best is just better than the others. The others will still do the job. And in this case, the Paladin, I'm starting to see there's a bit of rank inflation. I may have to readjust the ranks as I see who falls out near the bottom, because all these classes are really good. The Paladin stays strong. Divine Smite is crazy, and side point, half-orcs are busted in this game. They're super strong, because you get an ability that allows you to once a day crit. Having a once-a-day crit is incredibly strong, in case you don't know. It's a borderline out... I would argue that in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, it's completely unbalanced. In this game, it makes sense, but in D&D, do not include this ability. It's way too strong. And Paladins are some of the best classes to take advantage of this because of the amount of dice they can stack onto single hits. Additionally, half-orcs get even more value out of this because they're fucking insane triple crit multiplier. They deal so much damage, and the single ability alone that's available to all classes and races makes the Paladin super viable. On top of that, Paladin's just always been really strong. Their auras buff the party insanely well. They got access to healing. They're just a super well-designed, efficient class. 100%. I don't think I can put them anywhere else but S tier in this game because of the abundance of magic items as well. Bolstering them, strengthening them. There's no downsides to playing a Paladin. Your action economy might suffer, but hey, there's a class to fix that, and we're gonna get to it, I promise. Next up, we have the Ranger. Now, the Ranger, people are saying, oh, the Ranger's so good in Baldur's Gate. It's so good in Baldur's Gate. It's always been good. It's always been good. It's been good in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Y'all just saw the Beastmaster and didn't give the Hunter a second thought and went, why is this class so shit? Maybe because you're using your bonus actions to command your stupid fucking animal companion every turn instead of casting spells like a big boy. The Ranger has always been an incredibly strong class in Dungeons & Dragons. Y'all just didn't appreciate what you had. Yes, it got a buff in Baldur's Gate 3. Every class got a buff in Baldur's Gate 3. But I would say that it's no more than any other class. The Ranger's exactly is very similar.
Oh, but its new favorite terrain feature gives it a damage resistance.
They got rid of the favorite terrain ability in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you silly goose.
That was so recent.
It was nearly 4 years ago. It's been nearly half a decade. Anyway, the ability, yes, it's a good ability, but the abilities exist. There's already overhauls for them. Everyone just remembers how bad it was at launch and forgets how awesome it was after Xanathar's Guide. How amazing it was in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The Ranger is still exactly very similar to how it's always been. A super solid ranged martial with access to the second best spell list in the game. The Ranger is super good. People just whine and moan about it because they don't know how to play the class. And now people are rediscovering it, going, oh my god, it's so good. It's the same. It's just as good, in my opinion. I would argue that in comparison to everything else, I think it's almost weak because of it. I think this is the first time that we could say the Ranger's weak because of how everything else is insane in this game. So I would say that the Ranger sits comfortably in B tier because of this. This is where it sits in 5e. A lot of the Monk is all the way at the bottom in 5e. It's now at the top. Like, the ranking has been shifted. But Ranger is, honestly, it's okay. You guys need to try it. Next up, we have the Rogue. This is going to be a tough one. All right, the Rogue is tough. Two of the Rogue subclasses are They're you know, they're okay. They're fine. I have no complaints about the Rogue in Baldur's Gate 3. But then there's one class that's absolutely fucking insane, and that's the Thief, because it gets an extra bonus action and completely breaks the action economy. It is the best dip in the game. If we're talking about multi-classing, it is easily the best multi-class in the game. It outranks the fighter in its viableness because of this. The extra bonus action is crazy. That's an extra potion chug. It's an extra Mind Flayer ability if you've done the secret thing in the Creche. The bonus action allows you to rage and then use your frenzy attack. The bonus action allows you to make a weapon attack, an offhand attack, dash, disengage, hide. The extra bonus action is absolutely absurd. It's the best dip in the game. It's one of the strongest subclasses in general because of this, and it completely inflates the Rogue's rank. All of the other classes are pretty mediocre. The Rogue is fine. It's not great in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It doesn't deal a lot of damage. It deals an okay amount of damage. It doesn't deal an insane amount of damage. It deals an alright amount. In this game, it still deals an alright amount. It does deal enough. It does deal enough, though. It deals enough damage, which is good. But because it deals enough damage, and because the Thief Rogue is so good, I can't help but put it anywhere else but A tier. God, this is inflated. God, this is inflated. I'm gonna have to re-rank this. I'm gonna have to be like way more harsh. Next up, we have the Sorcerer. Okay, I think we might actually have our first C tier. I'm not gonna lie. The Sorcerer is a really good full spellcaster, but it struggles in a few very specific areas. It knows nothing for spells. It knows basically nothing for spells. This is its problem in 5e as well, but I think it's even more apparent in Baldur's Gate 3 because of the following information. Prepared casters are better in Baldur's Gate 3, just in general. I didn't mention this earlier, but the Cleric and the Druid and the Paladin are inflated partly because they can keep all their utility spells off for off combat, and then keep all of their combat spells. They can swap them whenever they want. They're prepared spells that can prepare throughout the day as the situation needs, making them way better for utility than most of the other classes. They are super strong. They are incredibly strong, and the Sorcerer is not one of them in this club. They do not get this. Yes, meta magic is powerful, and yes, the Sorcerer is on one of the strongest builds in the game, in my opinion. It's most of the strongest build in the game, but that limited spell list really hurts you in this game. It really hurts you, especially when the other classes can know so many spells at once and learn so many spells throughout the game. It makes the Sorcerer feel so underwhelming. Yes, they're fine, they deal enough damage, but god damn it, the other classes outrank them. They're fine, but they're just getting outranked. I would put them into C tier. They just don't compete. This is a big fall from grace. With the addition of magic items and prepared casters being significantly stronger, the Sorcerer falls behind. Next up we have the Warlock. The Warlock, the classic, the benchmark. This class is incredibly strong in general, but with the addition of Baldur's Gate 3, it's important to note how important space and positioning is. And having an Eldritch Blaster with Repelling Blast is really fucking funny. Being able to reposition your enemies, blast them off cliffs, shoot them, pull them, do shit to them in general, it's really strong. The Warlock is in an incredibly good position, as it always has been. It gets spells on the same spell scaling as full casters. Warlocks also... A lot of people complain about the number of spells Warlocks know per day. So, a level 5 Warlock and a level 4 Wizard walk into a bar. The Wizard has 4 firsts, 3 seconds, 2 thirds, 1 third. Or is it 2? It's 1 or 2. It's 1 or 2. Either way, they have about 8 or 9 spells. The Warlock also has 8 or 9 spells because of the existence of invocations and short rests, you dummy. If you are a Warlock, you're supposed to be casting Eldritch Blast. You can cast 2 spells casting Eldritch Blast anyway, but use your spell slots to cast something else, and then next turn cast Eldritch Blast, and then short rest to get the spell back. You have enough spell slots. You have more than enough. You get them back on short rests. You can let them fly, and they're always at higher level. You can cast the most fireballs in a day out of every class in the entire game. Wizards can cast 2 at 5th level. Warlocks can cast 6 at 5th level. Do I need to say more? That's way more fireballs than any other class. And if the metric is fireballs per day, the Warlock wins it in spades, is all I'm trying to say. The Warlock deals incredible amounts of damage. It's super good in positioning. It's got Eldritch Invocations in order to round out its utility, as well as its other spell options. Warlock, super strong, no complaints, easy A tier. And finally, the Wizard. I've already inflated it. Wizard is still good. The Evocation Wizard is fucking awesome. Being able to sculpt your spells around your enemies so you can chuck massive AoE damage abilities into the fray while also still hitting everything is super strong. Being able to have an arcane ward that can't be damaged, super strong. Being able to learn spells off of spell scrolls. Yes, it costs money, but you get a lot of that in this game. It's super strong. Being a prepared caster as well as a learned caster, that's super fucking strong. Holy shit, the Wizard is good. The Wizard is one of the best classes in the game by an absolute landslide. Spell scrolls are super easy to come by. You can teach your Wizard them, and then they can blow people up with them. The Wizard is easily one of the best classes in the game. It was the best class in 5th edition, and I would maintain that it keeps its position in this game. It is an incredibly strong class with incredibly strong abilities, with incredibly strong spells, and the ability to be always capable of dealing that damage. Easy S tier. for the wizard. And now to defragment things, to make things more fair and less clumped, less inflated. This is not what, there's nobody in D tier. This is the true ranking. And now let's just de-stratify these guys a bit. Gonna put you down here. It's gonna bump you down here. It's gonna bump you down here. And we're gonna. The Barbarian's not even that bad though. Oh god, this is as much as I can do. This is it. This is the tier list. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this list. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. Bing the bell. Tell all your friends. And finally, most importantly, join the Patreon, like the video, get the fuck out of my house.